Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Muir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
The BC Supreme Court ruling that the Blueberry First Nation in northeastern BC's treaty rights pretty well have been violated for about 100 years because they were supposed to be consulted about any development, and that's the same area of BC that's heavy into natural gas. What kind of an impact is this going to have on natural gas and also the Site C Dam on the Peace River?
Yeah, well, that's a question mark right now as to the answer there, but it certainly is an active question as a result of the June 29th ruling from the BC Supreme Court, Jim, because after, decades of industrial projects, resource projects in that area, not just oil and gas and hydro, but also, of course, there's robust wind energy area up there. There's forestry, there's agriculture. So it's a very important area to the economy of BC, and it has been for a very long time. And it seems that the view of the court is that this success that has been enjoyed by all British Columbians was accomplished without the Blueberry First Nation being in the conversation sufficiently. So what does it mean? I think there's certainly going to be a lot of negotiation that needs to happen. We've already seen a company called Storm Resources, which is a gas company that operates in Blueberry territory, signal that although it thinks its programs for gas exploration are solid for this year and probably next year. After that, this decision means that they're just not sure. Now, I don't think it should necessarily be assumed that, oh my goodness, this is a fundamental shift in the economic base and the activity on those lands. It means that the Blueberry First Nation has got a say in it that the court says has previously been denied. I have had the privilege of getting to know the Blueberry First Nation, some of their members, some of their leadership, as well as the Doig River First Nation, which is kind of a very closely aligned local First Nation. In fact, we hosted some youth from Blueberry First Nation at an event we did in 2020 where they brought some of their traditional performances to our audience in Vancouver. It was terrific to learn about their deep regard for the landscape and what it means and how it resonates for them. They have a special place located in Blueberry First Nation, this contentious area for the courts, that translates to where happiness dwells, and they sing about it, they drum about it. It's really amazing when you hear the chief drumming, as we did last year. Chief Marvin Yehi came to our event, who's also, been quite active in this case, and shared that. So I think there's a very, open and caring attitude about how all of this fits together for all British Columbians. But if the Blueberry First Nation isn't included in that, and they haven't been, obviously, as the court says now, then that's a problem that has to be rectified. And I would hope that it's in everyone's interest that there be successful negotiations to work out and bring certainty to it and bring the justice to it that clearly this First Nation is looking for.
Does that mean they're due all kinds of royalties or damages from this ruling?
That's one for the legal experts, I think, Jim. When you want to make things meaningful, you put dollar figures on them. So I'm sure that will be in the minds of many as to how to figure that out. So these things are seldom resolved overnight. So we'll see how this unfolds over time.
On the good news front here, and we're not saying that court ruling wasn't good news, because for those people it certainly is. And what's more, people should know, British Columbia is one of the few provinces where most of the Aboriginal land has not been ceded over through treaties or negotiated. Most of it's still wide open. They did have a treaty, and the courts have ruled that their treaty rights were not followed.
Yeah, and Jim, that's a treaty that goes back more than a century. It's one of several treaties. Most of them are in the prairies. This particular one, it is in the prairies, but it is in Alberta, but it extends into BC. And even the certainty of that treaty clearly now is seen as not having been sufficient. For those nations that are negotiating treaties or want to in future negotiate treaties, they don't even have the same standing as the treaty rights holders. So, there's other First Nations are going to be looking to this to be asking, what does it mean for us? So this is not only the beginning of resolution to the story for the Blueberry River First Nation, but also perhaps the beginning of a similar journey for many others. And, we're right now, I think Canadians have really woken up to the idea that so much of our success as a country is tied up in how our relations have been in the past with the Indigenous peoples resident in Canada. And how do we work that out? Because I think everyone now realizes we've got to get on the right side of this. It's just simply not just what courts are saying we need to do, it's the right thing to do. And how do we do it so that there is success for everybody? Because, First Nations, as I travel, as I speak to leaders and people, I was at an event speaking to a chief in the Fraser Valley yesterday. I feel there's a lot of empathy, a lot of wish to find reconciliation for the best interests of everybody. That's what I hear most of. There's other voices out there. It's a fractious space sometimes, but I think there's a very cool and calm, rational and caring attitude amongst the leadership of all of the Indigenous nations that I've encountered. I think that the fact that we were really moved this week to see that an Indigenous person, a woman, has become the new Governor General of Canada. That is so timely, and I think it sends a strong message that, in 2021 and beyond, we're in a new era, and we have to operate as if we are. We need to really examine how we do things.
$25 million in new development going to Agassiz, which is not too far from Vancouver. What's the story there?
Yes, well, yesterday, a company called Powerwood Corp, which is a small family-owned company based in BC, previously in Surrey, they relocated and enlarged their business operations, which involve custom cedar products, Western red cedar primarily, for all kinds of markets, for all kinds of uses. So they've gone to a previous industrial site located in Agassiz. They've purchased the site and they've moved their custom operations there. And they had an opening ceremony. I had the chance to go up yesterday, drop in on it. The local MLAs and MP and the forest minister all got to speak. And what we heard from the various levels of government was this is a great investment. It's a good indication that there is competitiveness in border communities in Canada. Right now we've seen a lot of forest products companies have been investing in the U.S. particularly, and I think that's a competitiveness problem that we have in BC and Canada in the forest products industry. So to see a company like this put an investment into the Fraser Valley that will create twice as many or 3 times as many jobs as they used to have is a pretty good show of confidence. The question being asked, of course, is, well, why would you do that? The answer from the owners was, we're doing it because we think we have favorable policy conditions, more restrictions rather on export of under-processed log products. And that makes it easier for a little company like this to get a hold of the raw material to turn out these really fine and beautiful architectural quality cedar products that the world really, really loves. People love Western red cedar when they're designing projects in Germany or in Japan or pretty much any country in the world. They love BC cedar. They do.
Yeah, it's the kind of construction that actually smells nice.
Yep. It's resistant to rot and insects, and it has that lovely glow, especially in certain light. We all know what I'm talking about. And that's special and rare. And you've got to come to BC and other places on the West Coast to get it.
And I live on the waterfront in New Westminster, and I see the ships come in every day that take the raw logs away. So fewer raw logs headed to Asia. That's
one thing that definitely came up. And, I think the fact that the government of Victoria has taken steps on that front. I think we see the ships like that. And if you look at the overall share of timber products and what's made out of them, raw logs are not by any stretch a large portion of it. They certainly are there, and when you see a ship, it looks big, but it's a very small percentage. Nevertheless, I think most people, when they see the ships, they think we could be doing more with that at home, which is what was talked about a lot yesterday. How do we have the higher value production out of grown in BC wood products that is done in BC rather than shipped elsewhere? So I would say the story yesterday was very much about dealing with this reality that there has been the lost opportunity there. And so adding more manufacturing jobs is exactly in the right direction.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, is there some more LNG news for BC?
Well, yes. We're seeing another new LNG proposal. Now, over the years, I know our eyes maybe tend to glaze over when we hear another idea for LNG, because they are very slow to develop into finished projects. In fact, we don't have a finished project yet, apart from the small Fortis facility on the Fraser River. We have the LNG Canada project underway. We have the wood fiber LNG project, which is possibly looking at a final investment decision later in the year. But now, out of the Northwest, we have a $55 billion proposal that would be considerably larger cost than the whole LNG project, which I believe the last figure we heard on that was $40 billion for the LNG plant in Kitimat and the pipeline and some of the other infrastructure needed. So this is a monster thing. It's a floating LNG facility. It's off the north coast. We heard recently that the Terrace City Council was briefed by the Cassis Sims LNG people who want to see production by late 2026 or 2027. So they need to build a pipeline. It's got to start by 2024. So there's some negotiations going on in regards to this. This has got, as one would expect in 2021, very significant leadership from the First Nations. In particular, in this case, it's the Nisga'a First Nation, and they are seeing the potential to be part of this story. The site for it is very close to Ginglocks, which is one of the Nisga'a villages at the mouth of the Nass River. There's several villages there, and they're going to set up a construction camp there. They also need to get a power line in from Uyanch, which is another of the Nisga'a villages up there. Beautiful, gorgeous valley up there, which has been, part of a treaty deal for more than 20 years now. And, the Nisga'a, I think, have got a bit of frustration because they're located north of where the action is in terms of Kitimat and Terrace and a lot of the opportunities, even though they have on paper, theoretically just a wonderful potential place for ongoing natural beauty hand in hand with some of the trappings of prosperity, like industrial investment. They can do all of these things, and they clearly are committed to it. If they brought this 12 million ton of LNG project forward, that's about the same size as the Kitimat LNG. So this is it's a little bit smaller, but it's very significant scale. So we've seen the initial paperwork be filed on this a couple of days ago, and now really it's going to be a long march to getting it built. So I think we should be wishing the Nisga'a leadership, who worked so hard to develop this opportunity, wish them well in moving forward, because LNG is more and more an urgent energy priority globally. And I know sometimes there's contention on this. LNG is good, LNG is bad. Well, I'm telling you, if you're looking to decarbonize your energy system, you need to do it by taking carbon out of the energy system. And the way to do that is to have lower carbon fuels. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is a lower carbon fuel. And I know it gets up the nose of some people who say, well, it's not perfect. All of our energy solutions have to be perfect with no environmental impact. Otherwise, we're going to oppose them. Well, that's not the real world we live in. You have to, have a roadmap and progress through it. And LNG is properly on that roadmap of energy transformation. And we had some other good news this week, Jim. The hydrogen plan, BC government hydrogen plan. They've been talking a lot about renewable natural gas. I think everyone knows that there's a kind of ceiling on how much renewable natural gas you can have. It comes from landfills. It comes from farming operations. It's kind of a limit to how much you can capture. If you get really efficient at it and capture all of the renewable natural gas, maybe if you're really, really, really lucky, you can get, say, 15% of your gas supply could be renewable. That's good, but it's not obviously all of it. So hydrogen, which is manufactured from natural gas, and you capture the carbon when you make the hydrogen, that's why it's a clean gas, is going to be something we see brought into our existing natural gas infrastructure. So if you're at home, turn on the shower right now, you got hot water because there's a boiler in your basement running natural gas. Well, in future, imagine that natural gas has hydrogen in it, as well as renewable natural gas, and that makes it cleaner. So, this is how I think things are going to proceed in our energy systems. It'll be this sort of slow transformation, innovation. Doesn't mean we need to tear up the streets and put in entirely new. There won't be a furnace police to come and haul your evil natural gas furnace away, because we're going to make the supply to it cleaner, right? Makes total sense. So that's how this LNG project fits in. They're having these same thoughts and conversations everywhere in the world. Europe, Asia, South America, they all need more energy, and it has to be cleaner. And BC is a huge part of that. And it ties back to the first thing we talked about, Blueberry First Nation. So they are a part, and they need to be more of a part of this global transformation in energy systems. And there's probably no single First Nation anywhere in the country that can be more a part of that than the Blueberry First Nation. So it's so important that things get worked out so everything's square on that.
We saw how fragile our supply chain is when that giant container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, causing a shortage of garden gnomes in England and sex toys for the rest of Europe. Apparently, that's what I'm told by my sources there. That was the buzz anyway. But with the fire that ravaged the village of Lytton, 800 people, a couple of people known dead, others are missing. That also cut rail lines. How vulnerable is the Canadian economy to these choke points in our supply chain? Yeah,
well, it feels, the number one thing is the human loss, and I think we're all thinking about that. There's still a lot of questions, and also there's the imminent and perhaps increasing risk of other fires in what is already ahead of schedule fire season. So, that's just awful when you have a single life lost. It sounds like we have a couple and still question marks about Lytton. The loss of property, how does that town reestablish itself? What do people want to see? Are people going to want to rebuild? Lots of people are saying, okay, how do we help with that? And hopefully we'll have those answers in due course. So, in terms of the less pressing issues of the economic needs, we are also looking at a restoration of rail service pretty quickly. So they've gotten in there clearly and done what they needed to do to reestablish trains. But the questions about how the fire got started in connection with rail traffic, there's going to be lots of public questions about that. We're already seeing good questions answered, and I think there's, again, a lot of blanks where simply the answers aren't available yet and more information is needed. But as a reminder of our supply chain, the Port of Vancouver is the economic heart of Western Canada because it's the gateway for goods, traffic, and so much that comes down the Fraser Canyon. So when one incident occurs that blocks that off, we immediately see the ramifications. Nowadays with road and other rail alternative routes like BC Rail, former BC Rail coming down into Vancouver, there's other ways to move goods. So we're somewhat insulated from that, unlike back in the day when it was that CN Rail coming down the Fraser that we all counted on. Nevertheless, we saw in Suez how things start to pile up, and there's probably a little bit of that in the system, and we'll see them rebound pretty quickly. But right now, mainly our thoughts are definitely with the people of Lytton, the leadership there that's just working frantically to answer these questions, and hopefully everyone out there who's listening is going to be thinking about ways that they can maybe help out when we know more about what's needed through whatever community initiatives are brought forward.
Stewart, a trend in the U.S., more and more homeowners are getting backup diesel power generators. Is that a trend that should be welcomed, or does it show us how vulnerable our power grid is?
Well, I think when we've seen disruptions in the U.S. and in some of the big states, Texas, California, there's a lot of eye rolling. It's okay, that's because of unreliable renewable energy, or that's because of underinvestment in the transmission system, or some of the other contributing factors. And I think there's truth to all of that. And is this some big imponderable question left to the energy regulators? They'll figure it out. Well, maybe it is, but at the same time, what's the average person doing? I'll tell you what they're doing in the States. The average person is doing what the average American always does, which they just go and deal with it. And they're dealing with the uncertainty in whether they're going to have power in their homes and their freezers defrosting and their internet not working. They're dealing with it by going and getting themselves a big-ass gen set running on diesel for when they need it. And this is one of those trends where those who can afford it, and not everyone can afford doing this, obviously. It can cost, possibly many, many thousands of dollars, depending on the setup you want. But people are doing this for their homes, which is a new thing. There was probably a little bit of that, the super rich and people in remote locations in the past, but now it's becoming just a thing to do in the suburbs. Where's your gen set? Which is a staggering idea if you're living in some, modern city in California, and it just becomes normal to add a gen set to your new home spec. And what a funny world we live in when it's come to that, eh?
Well, California has had rolling blackouts. When they get a heat wave, everybody turns their air conditioning up higher. Plus, they're still using their home computers and so on, so they don't have enough power. And BC, do we know when BC had that horrible heat wave that caused perhaps up to 800 deaths just in the Vancouver area alone, if that caused a great enough strain on the BC power grid that we are in danger of losing our power? Yeah,
well, we see in Alberta and California in the really, really hot weather, when the energy regulator comes out and says, hey, everybody, if you've got an electric car, don't use it. Don't plug it in if you want air conditioning. What? That wasn't part of the plan, was it? But this is where we are in 2021. It's about energy resilience. It's about climate change and our energy needs over time. If it's going to get hotter, we're going to need to cool ourselves. Some of those apartments, living in a place where, you can open a window and the breeze comes through and get it down to 23 or 25 degrees, Actually, that's not intolerable. But for people trapped in an apartment, they're a pensioner, they have no alternative place to go, they maybe don't have any family they can turn to, the facilities that governments maybe should be providing to allow for cooling aren't there, so they're just sitting in their home, and then they're dying. It was a silent tragedy that can't be repeated. And it may be part of the future. If this is part of climate change, it's something that has to be dealt with. And what's the answer? Putting air conditioning in every home? Well, that's obviously retrofits like that are not simple or cheap. So it'll take time, but it's also going to mean we need energy systems that are resilient over time. A couple of days ago, I was on a call with BC Hydro. They were doing a town hall across BC to find out what people think of their new plan for the coming decades. They're projecting 1.5% increase per year in electricity demand. And, there were people asking questions, well, are you sure it's not going to be a lot more than that because of electrification of the economy, if everyone's going to be driving electric cars? And we know from this recent evidence that having electric cars can disrupt your whole grid, and you have to manage that. Like, are you serious? 1.5%? And they seem to think that there's a whole other bunch of factors in there. Generally speaking, we're getting more energy efficient. So a lot of the increased demand is served by, efficiency gains. So you don't need to build a new dam when people are buying, more efficient fridges. That's the hope. And then they have things like demand side management, which is something BC has traditionally tried to avoid. They have it on Vancouver Island, where you have different cost of electricity at different times of day. And that's, depending on who you talk to, it's either very popular or very unpopular. But I think we'll be seeing more of that across BC. It's what they were talking about. And so I think, be prepared. Be prepared for an energy bill from BC Hydro that looks very different in future, when they try to deal with this need for an abundant energy system.
Stuart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.